Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to this Friday afternoon webinar where I have got some hot off the press news for you while I'm going to talk to you about using the new job support scheme and how to prepare for lockdowns. But anybody listening to the news will know that there is so much more to the new job support scheme and so much more that is associated with those lockdowns. So today's webinar I'm going to be covering quite a few things, but just as a starter, I can see that we've still got some registrants who are still busy registering, and those attendee numbers are going up quite significantly at the moment. So for those of you who are familiar with the process, it takes just a few seconds for everybody to get on and they can hear me, and I just want to make sure that nobody misses out on any of the important information. So of course today is Friday the 23rd of October. Where is the time going? But here we are once again looking at furlough and it's not furlough anymore, it is the job support scheme and how we can help your business. So today's webinar is going to last for about an hour. I say about an hour because of course I've got some jam-packed information to share with you, but I really do want to sort of be able to help you and support you with those all-important questions. So just very briefly, for those of you who don't know, who are HR for UK? HR for UK is a leading provider for HR and employment law support. We also provide help and support to businesses, covering payroll as well as health and safety. So we are a nice all-rounded HR company that can help you with pretty much every aspect of your business relating to HR and the matters that come out of that. We've got over 30 years of experience and we've got some fantastic 5-star reviews on our website, and I would really encourage you to go and have a look on our website at www.hrforuk.com to read for yourself what our clients say about us. Of course I'm going to tell you all the great things that HR for UK can do, but of course it's always what our clients think of us, and that's what really counts in my books. So do go and have a visit and go and read those 5-star reviews for yourself. So just a little introduction about myself. Obviously it's Angela Clay, and as an HR and employment law solicitor, I am the Managing Director for HR for UK, and I am responsible for HR for UK's role as a leading professional in HR services that we provide to businesses like you, but more importantly, to make sure that we can get you through this coronavirus crisis. I know when I first started giving these webinars back in April, my vision was to make sure that businesses can come through this coronavirus crisis successfully by offering you clear, practical, professional advice and support. And that is my vision today. As this pandemic seems to be going on longer and longer, my vision does not change, and I want to make sure that you are as prepared as you possibly can be by having that clear and practical advice to make sure that you come out of this crisis successfully. So today we're going to cover quite a few things. We are going to be talking about the new job support scheme which comes into place. It kickstarts from the 1st of November, and how these schemes are going to be you are going to be able to use these schemes to support your business. We're going to quickly touch on the job retention bonus payments and how to make those claims. We're going to look at how the funding is going to affect your workforce, and I think that's probably going to take up quite a bit of my time today. But I also just want to touch on how to prepare your businesses for local lockdowns, and of course just a big reminder to look out for those HSE, those health and safety inspectors who are checking in on organisations to make sure that they are actually COVID safe. There has been numerous reports on organisations that have had to close because there has been an outbreak within the workforce. So of course HSE have seen this as I want to say an opportunity. They've seen this as an area of concern, which is why they have employed quite a few more inspectors to actually go out and to look at that, and just making sure that we can help and support you in making your business COVID-19 secure. So again, just looking at those measures to make sure that if those inspectors do come knocking on your door, you will have that risk assessment in place and you will have implemented all those measures. But hopefully at this point in the pandemic crisis, you would already have put those measures in place, and you would welcome anybody come knocking on your door. And then of course at the end we will have some Q&A questions, and I will be happy to answer any questions. Just a quick reminder, there is a panel on the right hand side where you can pop your questions in. I've already had a quick hello from Esther, so Esther, hello back to you, and welcome if this is your first webinar. If it isn't, I'm glad to see you back. So that's really what we are going to be covering, and those questions are really important, because if you are thinking of a question, there are, I'm sure, at least one or two other people in the room who have that same question. So please don't feel shy to ask those questions. I'll be more than happy to help them. And as always, what we do at the end of every webinar is we take those questions, we collate it, and we send out that Q&A questionnaire afterwards when you get the recording of the of today's session. So please do use that question, the question box. Do pop those questions in, and it doesn't have to be about today's webinar, it can be about anything. So I do look forward to it. I also look forward to some suggestions on some future webinars, and I've got some exciting news that I'm going to share with you about how we're going to be doing our webinars going forward. So there is going to be a slight change, but of course it is going to be beneficial for you so as we can cover a lot more, and that these Friday afternoon webinars can be focusing on the current pandemic crisis. So do hold on to that thought, as I will share that with you when I get to the end of the webinar to tell you about what's coming up next. As I've already said, this webinar will be recorded and will be available to you early parts of next week. Once we've got the recording done and we've compiled those Q&As, they will get sent out to you next week. So let's crack on with this week's webinar. So this week has been quite a turbulent week with quite a few changes. Just when we thought that everything was where we needed to be, we've got back onto that roller coaster ride, and I have to be honest and say it feels a little bit like it was back in March when we were waiting for all these guidance to come out from government to tell us what we need to do. We thought we had that in the bag, but of course with the Chancellor's announcements yesterday, that has all changed before the scheme has even started. So let's have a look at where we are, let's have a look how we can help you, and let's make the differences between the schemes clear for you so you know which scheme you need to participate in, what it's going to mean for you and your employees. So we now know that the government has introduced a 3-tier lockdown restrictions in England. We also know that the devolved governments have already sort of got their own restrictions in place. We know that Liverpool, Lancashire and Manchester have been placed in the highest restriction levels, so they are falling into tier 3. As I've already said, the devolved governments have already intensified their own coronavirus restrictions, and we know with Wales they go into a 2-week lockdown from the 23rd of October, so that's from today. So it's all fair and well putting us into these lockdown and these severe restrictions, but what financial support does that give businesses during these times? We know that the furlough scheme is coming to an end on the 31st of October. We've got less than a week left of the furlough scheme, but what happens next? So on the 23rd of September, the Chancellor announced that it was going to be replacing the furlough scheme with a new scheme called the Job Support Scheme. And that originally was simplified to the JSS. And that comes into effect from the 1st of November for a period of 6 months. So that will take us through until the end of April 2021. But of course, we've seen that the government has now had to rapidly react to the latest restrictions. And before the scheme even started, the government made a second amendment to the scheme, to include a provision where businesses were forced to close down because of the higher level of restrictions that have been in place, where there is a legal requirement for businesses to close due to the local lockdown. There was a lot of outcry about how the government was going to support some businesses that are already struggling, particularly those who are in the leisure, hospitality sectors and industries. So, you know, really, really putting an incredible amount of pressure on those organisations. So we're going to have a look at that. As I said, I'm also going to touch on the job retention bonus, where we can get that £1,000 for every successfully furloughed employee that is still on your payroll on the 31st of January. So I'm going to touch on that very quickly. And we also know that there has been some government funding that has been agreed, you know, as separate emergency funds, and there will be separate local measures on how to have access to those funds. We won't cover that because that will be very local to where you are, depending on where you fit in. So that's just a whistle-stop tour on what we are going to be covering today. So before we waste any more time, let's get down to the nitty-gritty of the job support scheme. So as I've already said, the furlough scheme, as we know it, comes to an end on the 31st of October. Obviously, the government cannot keep jobs open only inside of the furlough scheme, and it cannot save every job, which is why the new job support scheme was created. The job support scheme is quite different to the furlough scheme in that it will only support people in work. It is an option to employers to keep people in work on shorter hours as an alternative to making staff redundant. The company will continue to pay employees its wages for the time that they work, and the burden of the hours not work is going to be split between the employer and the government. So that is going to be through wage support, but the employee also has to make a sacrifice, and this is going to be through a salary reduction. But the upshot of it all is there will be a job and the employee will still be employed. Since the announcement of the job support scheme, which, as I said, was announced on the 24th of September, I think I said the 23rd of September earlier on, it was the 24th of September when the job support scheme was introduced, we have had 3 amendments that have happened since then. And as I say, the scheme hasn't even started. So when I talk about going on to that furlough roller coaster ride that we had back in March, it does feel similar at the moment, but hopefully after today you will be a little bit clearer on what the scheme means for you. So the 2 amendments, broadly speaking, was the original amendment where they extended it to the extension, which referred to businesses that were having to close. And then, of course, the most recent changes that took place yesterday. And I'm going to have a look at both of those. The schemes have been given a new name. So the schemes will now be known as the Job Support Open Scheme and the Job Support Closed Scheme. And I think using the words open and closed is to try and liken it to what's actually happening within the business. The latter, of course, the Job Support Closed Scheme, is aimed at those businesses that have been required to close under lockdown regulations. So that is where there is a legal requirement for the business to close. You will go onto the Job Support Closed Scheme. So under the Job Support Open Scheme, an employer will need their employee to work at least 20% of their normal hours. Now, you will recall that originally that was 33%. As of yesterday, of the Chancellor's announcements, it is now reduced down to only 20% of their normal working hours. The employee will receive their normal pay for the hours that they work, and 2/3 of their pay, which will be subject to a cap for the hours that they do not work. The cap does bite for those earning more than £3,125 per month. So those are individuals who are on higher earnings will probably not get the full extent of the support as what those will who are on lower earnings, because there is that cap. For those 2/3 top up, the government will pay 61.67% and the employer will only pay 5%. If you remember, under the previous scheme, it was split 50-50. After listening to what the concerns were, the government has had a U-turn. They have made a change. So the government will pay the lion's share of the contribution and the employer will only need to pay 5%. The employer will still need to pay the employer national insurance contributions and the pensions auto-enrollment contributions on the full amount. So you'll be paying it for the entire amount, not just the employer contribution. So whilst it says 5%, it's probably a little bit more than that. But the biggest cost is obviously going to be picked up by the government, which of course will filter down to the public purse. But a big change in here is that there must be a written agreement between the employer and the employee. And the employee must agree to those changes. So it's really, really important that you do get those agreements ready for your employees. Under the job support closed scheme, the position hasn't changed because the employee, of course, will not be working. The position remains the same, that the employee will receive 2/3 of their normal wages, and that 2/3 will be funded by the government. But again, it will have a cap, and that cap again will bite against those who earn more than £3,125 per month. Under the closed scheme, the employer will have to pay the national insurance contributions, the employer national insurance contributions, and the auto-enrollment pension contributions on the total government amount. Again, as with the open scheme, there must be an agreement in place. It must be in writing, and the employee must agree to those terms. So unlike on the furlough scheme, the government was a little bit woolly in the early days about the agreement, that it could be a verbal agreement. The government, in their guidance, has come out very, very clearly that it must be a written agreement. So those agreements are very, very important to make sure that you have those. And the government will be clamping down to double check to make sure that you have that in place. We at HR for UK do have those template agreements. They have been updated to reflect the new changes for both the job support open scheme and the job support closed scheme. They are available, so do get in contact with us so that we can share those agreements with you. So I'm going to now talk about matters that's going to apply to both of the schemes. So employers can top up their wages beyond those amounts that have been provided for under the scheme. This is another change that took place yesterday, because the first version of the job support scheme indicated that the government expected that employers would not top up the wages beyond the scheme, simply because there was an expectation that employers simply could not afford to do that. Now that they have reduced the employer contribution to down to just 5%, they have now allowed employers to make an additional top up. All SMEs are eligible to participate in the job support schemes, both the open and the closed, but larger businesses will only be eligible if their turnover has fallen due to the coronavirus. And the government has explained how they are going to do that, and that is going to be according to their VAT returns. So there is going to be measures in place that the government will be able to identify whether there has been that, and they'll be able to do that through the VAT return. The government discourages, it hasn't prohibited, but it has discouraged larger businesses from claiming on the job support scheme if it is going to be making capital distribution. So in other words, if they are going to be making dividend payments, they are encouraged not to participate in the scheme. So again, while it hasn't prohibited, the government is really, really keen to make sure that the public purse is protected, that it only companies and organisations that genuinely need that support participate in the scheme. So let's just have a look at fully funded public sector employers cannot claim. But public sector employers who receive private funding will be able to make a claim if their private funding has been disrupted. So again, that is very, very clear. If you are a public sector employer, you cannot make a claim, but there are many organisations that have part of their funding coming from the government and part of their funding as private. If your private funding has been disrupted, you will be able to participate in the scheme. So employers will be able to claim in arrears, so it is on monies that have already been paid. So as an employer, you will need to make those salary payments first, including the government contribution, and then you will make a claim to get a refund from the government to reimburse you for costs already incurred. The first claims can be made from the 8th of December. In other words, 5 weeks after the scheme opens on the 1st of November. And the claims process will be on an online portal, very similar to the way it was done for the job the job retention scheme. So very similar to the furlough scheme, it will be done through a portal, but you can only put that claim in on or after the 8th of December. An employer cannot make a claim for an employee who has been made redundant and or is serving their contractual statutory notice period during a claim period. It is unclear at the moment from the guidance whether an employee who has resigned and is working out their notice can be claimed on the scheme. But they are very, very clear that if an employee has been made redundant and is serving out their statutory notice during the claim period, they cannot participate in the scheme. So I think it's very, very important before you make that claim is to really understand what is what you are claiming for each individual, because HMRC will be able to pick it up through your RTI claims. So let's have a look at what pay is required to be paid. To calculate the amount of pay, we're going to have a look at those who are on fixed pay, so fixed salaries, and we're going to also have a look at those who are on variable pay, so those whose pay varies. So for employees who are paid a fixed salary, this is going to be referred to as the reference salary in the scheme. And the reference salary is going to be the greater of the wages payable to the employee in the last pay period ending on or before the 23rd of September, or the wages payable to the employee in the last pay period ending on or before the 19th of March, which is probably the salary that was used when you calculated the salary for the coronavirus job retention scheme. So it is the greater of those two wages. So for those who receive variable pay, so in other words, those individuals whose pay varies, again, it's going to be referred to as the reference salary. So the reference salary for variable pay is going to be the greater of wages earned in the same calendar period in the tax year of 2019-2020. So you will have a look at the same period as last year. The average wages payable in the tax year 2019 to 2020, or if there is somebody who has been employed before after the 19th of March, it's going to be the average payable wages from the 1st of February until the 23rd of September. So that is how that is going to be calculated. Don't worry, when we send out the questions and answers, we are going to make sure that that is included so you can have a breakdown of that. It will also come out as part of our communications that go out to you. So let's have a look at what employees qualify to be eligible to the scheme. And this is both on the open scheme and on the closed scheme. The rules are the same. So eligible employees are able to claim on the job support grant if they were on the PAYE between April the 6th, 2019 and the 23rd of September 2020. So need to have been on your PAYE and a full RTI submission, a real-time information submission notifying HMRC of those payments in respect of that employee must have been made at some point from the 6th of April 2019 to the 23rd of September 2020, so quite a long period. Employers can claim for employees that were in their employment on the 23rd of September. So I think I've got that a bit confused. Employers can only claim for employees that were in their employment on the 23rd of September. So anybody who joined your organisation on the 24th of September will not be able to participate in the scheme. So it does exclude any new recruits that you have recruited since. So if an employee's employment ceased after the 23rd of September, but you have subsequently rehired them, so you've taken them back into your employment, you will be able to make a claim for those individuals. Employees who are on any type of contract will be eligible for the scheme. So that includes employees who are on 0-hour contracts, those who are on fixed-term contracts or on a temporary contract. They will be able to participate on the scheme. Agency workers are regarded as employees of the employment agency. So if you've got any agency workers, whilst they are not your employees, they will be employees of the agency and they will be able to participate in the scheme through the agency, the employment agency, provided that they have been identified as employees for the purposes of income tax purposes. Employees do not have to have previously been on the furlough scheme. So this is really good. If an employee was not eligible to participate on the furlough scheme, because this is a brand new scheme, if they weren't on the previous scheme, they can participate under the new scheme. So that is really beneficial for businesses. So as I've already said, employers will be able to top up employee wages above the level of the minimum contribution. It will be at their own expense if they wish, and they are not obliged to do so. So if an employee is coming to you saying you have to top up, be rest assured you're not under any obligation to do that. So employers cannot claim both under the job support open scheme and the closed scheme. It is one or the other. You will only be able to make a claim in respect of one scheme for a single employee for the same day. So again, you need to come off the one scheme to go on to the next scheme, to come back off, to go back onto the open scheme. So again, you can't claim for both schemes at the same time. So let's have a look at what work is required. So we know under the open scheme, an employee has to work a minimum of 20% of their normal working hours. Under the closed scheme, they do not work at all because the business is closed. There is no work. So the only time you need to think about what hours and what work is required, it only applies to the open scheme, and that is 20% of their normal hours. After 3 months, the government is going to review this and they are going to consider whether there is going to be an increase in the minimum hours threshold. Under the open scheme, as I've already said, an employee must work at least 20% of their hours for a minimum of 7 days. This bizarrely means that an employee is only required to work 1 day in a week to qualify for the scheme. So very, very low threshold. So let's have a look at what normal working hours are. So under the job support open scheme, normal working hours are the hours that are stated in an employee's contract of employment. So it is their contractual hours. not the varied hours that they have been working under if they were perhaps under the flexible furlough scheme. It is their contractual hours as stated in their contract of employment. For those employees who are on 0-hour contracts or work more flexible hours, we are waiting for some more guidance on how to calculate those hours. It is a very complex way that the rules are around normal hours are calculated, and as soon as those rules are clarified, we will share that with you so you know how to calculate what those normal hours are for people who work variable hours. Okay, so of course under the job support closed scheme, the employee must not work, so there are no hours to calculate. So there is a question about what about a situation where an organisation has been forced to lock down. So this would be typically in the hospitality, a restaurant, where an employee can perhaps do some other work. So this is a big question mark over, for example, a front of house manager who can't physically be in the restaurant itself, but there is admin work that can be carried out, and that admin work can be carried out at home. So how does the scheme apply to that? And the simple answer is, at the moment, we don't know, and we are waiting for more information on how the schemes would apply in those situations. So let's have a look at how the employers can make that claim for payment. As I've already said, grant payments are made directly to the employer in arrears. It is a reimbursement to the employer covering the government contributions. The grant will not cover employer national insurance contributions or the auto-enrollment pension contributions. That will be remain payable by the employer. The employers must pay the employees their contracted wages for the hours that they have worked, and of course they must pay the government and the employer contributions for the hours that they have not worked. The employer must submit that all-important RTI, that real-time submission to HMRC for the pay period before a claim can be submitted. So don't make your claim before that RTI has been submitted. Even for organisations who have been forced to close, so in other words, those who fall into the job support closed scheme, the employers must make payment first before you can make that claim before you can make that claim for that grant. And again, you must submit that RTI claim to HMRC before you can make your application for that grant. It is a grant, it is not repayable, so again it goes to the public purse. Employers will be able to claim in arrears, as I've already said, from the 8th of December, and payments will be made after the claim has been approved. We're not quite sure what their time scale is going to be, but it's not going to be immediate. So in terms of managing cash flow, do bear in mind you will have to make that payment first and get that reimbursement back at a later stage. So what happens if there is not enough work for the employee? So the original purpose of the job support scheme was to protect viable jobs. The scheme is not helpful for businesses where there is no work now, but there will be work at some point in the future. It doesn't really work for those situations. There has to be work now, because the key point about the support scheme is that there must be at least 20% of those contractual hours worked. So when the original scheme was introduced, where an employee had to work 33% of those hours, it was quite a significant amount, whereas with the reduction, that has been reduced. So there will be more support for jobs to be able to, there is more support for employers to keep employees on under the scheme. If there is no work at all, the business should really think long and hard what the alternatives are going to be. Is it better to carry out a redundancy, or is it better to engage with your staff and come up with an alternative unpaid solution for longer periods? That will be a discussion between you and your employees. That will be quite key in a situation where there is no work in the immediate future, but there will be work in the months to come. So we're looking at future employability, whether it is an option to make that difficult decision of carrying out a redundancy, or coming to an agreement with your employee where there is unpaid periods for the longer term. But that is a completely separate discussion and something that you should take into consideration. And of course, we would strongly advise get some help and support from us if that is an option that you do need to go down. A big question, is redundancy a better option to the job support scheme? If you asked me this question earlier in the week, I would have said absolutely, and I would have done a calculation for you to show how it would work in practice and how more cost effective it would potentially be to carry out a redundancy. But with the government's U-turn yesterday providing significant changes to the scheme, providing significant support to organisations, reducing that minimum work threshold, I would probably say not at the moment. But redundancy is perhaps not the right option. Employers should still look very carefully to see whether it is something that you should be considering. I'm not saying go down the redundancy route. What I am saying is have a look at it and make an informed decision whether it is right for you or not. But the support scheme there is to support people in work, and those people who can work at least 20% of their hours. So let's have a look at what if an employee cannot work. So the principle behind the scheme is that an employee must work at least 20% of their hours. And I know I'm going to start sounding like a stuck record, but hopefully by the time I start getting to the questions, you will all be shouting at me saying what the answer is. And I do apologize if I do sound like a stuck record, but I really want to get that message across. Because you'll be surprised at how many people are still asking questions about it. So let's have a look at it. So the principle behind the scheme is that an employee must work at least 20% of their hours. So if an employee is sick, they are not working, which means they cannot be on the scheme. So if someone is sick, they should be, as long as they are eligible, they would be entitled to statutory sick pay, or if your company offers company sick pay and they are eligible, they would get company sick pay. So if an employee is sick, they are not working, so they are not eligible to participate in the scheme. If an employee is on family leave, so for example, they might be on maternity leave, paternity leave, shared parental leave, or perhaps they are on adoption leave, the employee is not working, so they will not be entitled to participate in the scheme. In terms of what they would be entitled to pay, subject to eligibility, they would be entitled to the statutory family leave payment. So for example, statutory maternity pay, statutory paternity pay, statutory shared parental leave pay, or statutory adoption leave pay. And again, if the company has enhanced payments for those family-friendly leaves, then of course, subject to eligibility, I'll put my teeth in, they would be entitled to that. If an employee is shielding, they are not working, so they will not be able to participate in the scheme. So again, as I say, without sounding like a stuck record, the rule is that the employee must work at least 20% of their hours to be eligible in the scheme. So hopefully all of you enjoyed shouting at me to say the employee is not working. So you get the gist of where we're going with that. So the big question that has been coming on is, can an employer force the employee to work this way? And the simple answer is yes. The job support scheme is a variation to the employment term. So that is very, very clear. It is a variation of terms, but, big but, the employee must agree to the new short-time working arrangements. So you must go into consultation with your staff to agree those variations, to make those changes by entering into that job support scheme agreement, whether it is the open scheme or the closed scheme, and you must keep a record of it in writing. The guidance that has come out is, you know, the word must in writing is in bold, and the emphasis is on that. And it must be made available if HMRC requests to see a copy of it. The employee does not really have much choice, and the options to the employee is that they can get at least 77% of their wages and they have a job, or the alternative is that they will face redundancy and they will not have a job. And I think in the current climate, many employees will much prefer to receive reduced wages and have that job security. But an employee cannot object to being forced to work in this way. If they do object to it, you have got a couple of options, and I'll touch on that in a moment as to what you can do, because you know you may well get those individuals who are going to flatly refuse, but I will help you and talk you through what you can do as an employer to manage those individuals who are flatly refusing to go onto the scheme. At the beginning of furlough, we saw that there was a lot of employees who were refusing to go onto the furlough scheme, but as it became more and more obvious and apparent to what the alternatives were, they did actually take it up. So let's have a look at what about an employee who is on a fixed term contract, or those who are working part-time. Do they qualify for the scheme? The simple answer for that is, again, yes, they do, because they will be working. And the work that they must be doing must be at least for 20% of their normal contracted hours. So, of course, for part-time employees, that would the 20% will be prorated to their part-time hours. Any employees who have transferred to a new business, so where there has been a sale and the 2P provisions have applied, as long as the transferor, so the outgoing employer, had the employee on their payroll and they submitted an RTI submission, a real-time submission to HMRC on or before the 23rd of September, then the employee under their new employer will be eligible to participate in the scheme. So another big question that has come out of the scheme is, you will remember under the furlough scheme, we encouraged businesses to serve notice on employees to take their annual leave. So how does annual leave work with the job support scheme? So if you have been listening to me, there is a common theme. So if you are annual leave, are you working? The answer to that should be no, you are not. So the simple answer is no. An employee will not be able to participate on the scheme if they are on annual leave, simply because they will not be working 20% of their normal contractual hours. The scheme cannot be used to subsidise holiday pay. So unlike under the furlough scheme, it cannot be used to subsidise holiday pay. Of course, it does not prevent an employee from requesting to take annual leave during the time that your company may be participating in the scheme. And of course, any annual leave is paid at 100% of their normal wages. In other words, their rate of pay pre-COVID, and their rate of pay will be calculated in accordance to the Employment Rights Act. So that will include any overtime and commission payments that they may be entitled to. And of course, the company will have to pay that outright. There is no subsidy in terms of holiday pay. Some questions that are coming in is, would it be better to agree a permanent new working pattern with the employee on reduced hours? Now, this is a scenario where an employer will be paying the employee more hours to work. This could be agreed that the employee works the new working pattern, but it will move them onto a part-time contract. This can be done, but I would urge caution with this because an employee may not be agreeable to this new proposed arrangement. So you really need to consider this very carefully before you go down that. And of course, you would need to go through a process, so that variation of term process before you implemented it. But one of the things you could consider is dismissing the employee on their existing terms and re-engaging them on the new terms, but there is a risk that you may be faced with a constructive unfair dismissal claim if an employee has more than 2 years service. Of course, if they've got less than 2 years service, there is no risk because they don't have qualifying service to be able to take you to an employment tribunal. So let's have a quick look at some more coronavirus stuff, as we call it. I'm going to touch very briefly on the job retention bonus scheme. We've got some fantastic questions coming in, and I hope to get to those very quickly. So just a quick reminder, the job retention bonus scheme, that is to encourage previously furloughed employees to come back to work. They do need to be on your payroll on the 31st of January 2021, and you will be able to make an application for a one-off bonus payment of £1,000 per previously furloughed employee. You can claim both the job retention bonus as well as the job support scheme, both on the open and closed scheme. So you can claim under both. Of course, just a quick reminder on those qualifications. There are conditions that must be met. So the employee must previously have been furloughed in accordance with the coronavirus job retention scheme. A coronavirus job retention scheme claim must have been made in respect of that employee, and the employee must have been continuously employed until the 31st of January 2021. There mustn't have been any break in their employment. And of course, the employee must have received at least £520 per month between the 1st of November and the 31st of January, or at least over the period of the 3 months, an average of £1,550. Accurate and up-to-date RTI submissions to HMRC for the periods need to be submitted referring to the period on and after the 31st of January 2021. A key point, and something that has come out in the woodwork, a previously furloughed employee must be on your employment on the 31st of January, must not be serving out their contractual or statutory notice. They must not have resigned and be working at that notice, because that will stop you from making that claim. If you are, of course, in that redundancy process and not yet served that formal notice, you can still make that claim. But as soon as you serve notice, that formal notice that their employment is going to be terminated, that will stop you from being able to participate in making that a claim for that bonus. Just a point of caution, a top tip is an employee's employment must not terminate on the 1st of February. So whilst we are saying they have to be in employment on the 31st of February, don't go and make sure that their first day of termination is on the 1st of February. Save that date, keep them on employment, and for some quirky reason, it is only safe to make sure that their termination date is on the 2nd of February. And it's all to do with the way that the information is submitted through the portals and the timings on the way the RTR submissions are submitted. So if you are going to have somebody leaving, make sure that they're still in your employment on the 1st of February, and make sure that their first day gone is on the 2nd, because you might find that if you do have them gone from the 1st of February, you might lose out on that bonus. So let's have a look at self-isolation. I'm quite conscious that I've got 10 minutes left and I've got quite a few things that I still want to cover with you. Keep those questions coming in. I am going to cover them, but I think I've got some key things that I do still want to share with you, and I will do a quick whistle-stop tour on some of them. But let's just have a quick look at self-isolation. So the health protection coronavirus restrictions, self-isolation, England regulations 2020 came into force on the 27th of September. These regulations only apply to England. It is different in Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland because the devolved governments have got their own regulations that have come in place. So I'm only going to talk about the England regulations. So I apologise if you're in one of the devolved governments and you're waiting for this key information. But for those of you who are in England, it is now an offence. It is a criminal offence for an employer to knowingly permit a worker or an employee, or to induce them or to force a worker or an employee to attend any place other than where they are self-isolating. In other words, their home, or where they have chosen as their designated place as self-isolation. So it is a criminal offence to force an employee knowingly to have an employee in your workplace, or to require them to work to be anywhere else other than at home. It is also a criminal offence to permit a worker to come into your workplace. So letting them coming into your a workplace, whether it be a factory, whether it is in a company vehicle, whether it is to drive to go and visit a client, whether it is to be anywhere else other than where they are at home, whilst knowing that they have to self-isolate. So it's all about doing these actions knowing that an individual should be self-isolating. This includes individuals who are self-isolating with someone who they live with who is COVID positive, okay? Under these regulations, there is also an obligation under the employee. The employee is under an obligation to tell their employer that they are required to self-isolate. Not to do so, they will be committing a criminal offence under these regulations by not telling you that they have to self-isolate. And there are significant fines that can be imposed on businesses and individuals for breaching these regulations. And again, it has been in the news more recently where a fine of £40,000 was imposed on students. I think it was in Nottingham, and I think it was as a result of ignoring these regulations. So very, very serious to take note of this. Let's just have a quick look about health and safety detriments and dismissals in the time of COVID. So this is where an employee refuses to come into work because they are afraid that they feel that they are in serious and imminent danger of catching COVID-19. So if you've been on previous webinars, you will know that this refers to Section 44 of the Employment Rights Act. So is catching COVID-19 putting individuals at imminent danger? Now, I'm not going to go into a debate whether it is or isn't, because we just simply don't know. We can't see it. Can we see it? Is there an imminent risk? Can we see it literally coming to us? No, we can't. But that's not the question. The question is, whether the employee feels that they are at imminent risk and danger. And that's something that we can't, there is no straightforward answer to that. But what we do know is that there is no guarantee that the workplace is safe. Even if an employer puts in all the government measures in relation to making your organisation COVID secure to prevent the transmission of COVID-19, there is no guarantee that it will not be transmitted. So it doesn't matter what an employer thinks, it's what an employee thinks. So if an employee concludes that there is a risk and that they are in imminent danger of catching COVID-19, they can refuse to work. Whether they get paid for their refusal to work, there are two schools of thought, neither of which have been tested in a court because, of course, it is COVID-19 specific. This will need to be decided by the Supreme Court, which by the time it goes through, we will only get an answer in about 5 years' time. But what I am going to talk to you about in a moment is what are the options. So hang on to that thought. So what do you do with employees who do refuse to come to work? Because there might be different reasons why they are refusing to come to work. So the practical answer is involve the employees with discussions. Discuss their safety concerns. Share with them your COVID-19 risk assessment and then consider your options. So option one is you can dismiss the employee. This is not a good idea. It is extremely risky. Not only is it risky, it will be automatically unfair under the Employment Rights Act. An employee does not need 2 years qualifying service, and the compensation is uncapped. So to dismiss an employee who has said that they do not want to come into work because they fear for that they are in imminent danger of catching COVID-19, it is very risky and it is unadvisable to dismiss them. What is the option? So option two is the employee can stay at home and you can pay them full pay while they sit at home. This is, of course, the safest option because there is no risk of an employment tribunal claim because the employee is at home and they are getting full pay. But this is not the best option for an employer because soon the jungle drums will be drumming, and before you know it, your entire workforce will be having that sharing that same view that they feel that there is that imminent danger and will want to stay at home on full pay, which means you'll have no staff to do the work. So not only will you be paying them on full pay, you will need to engage in temporary workers to do the work that needs to be done. So it will be a significant cost to you as an employer, but it is an option. So let's have a look at option three. So option three is you can let the employee stay at home, but it is unpaid. This is the best option, but of course it's not perfect because, as I've already mentioned, there is the potential risk that there is a breach of contract, and but there will be a long time before we get to an answer. We anticipate that it will only get to the Supreme Court in about 5 years' time. So on balance, do you pay it now? Do you not pay it now and risk that in having to make a payment at some point in the future, at which point you would have been able to put some savings aside to be able to cover any potential claims, or not pay it at all and not have to pay it in any event. But from a practical point of view, when an employee realizes that they will not be paid, it might focus their minds and reevaluate the situation. And some of them may well return. There are three options. They will either return to work and they will carry on working. Some will stay at home and accept that they will not be paid. Some will stay at home and, of course, sue you through an employment tribunal claim, which will then ultimately end at the Supreme Court, and you will have an answer in about 5 years' time. So the best option is to let them stay at home unpaid, and how you deal with the pay element, I would probably recommend put some savings aside for about 5 years' time to see what the outcome is going to be. Let's just quickly look at what about travel to work. And this is particularly in relation to employees who use public transport to get to and from work. So they may well use a bus or a tube or a tram, but and they view that that public transport is unsafe. They will be protected under Section 111 of the Employment Rights Act from dismissal. So again, do not dismiss if someone is saying, you know, I'm using public transport, I fear that the public transport is putting me at imminent danger, at catching coronavirus. they will have a very strong argument that that is in fact the case. The definition of a workplace under the Act is very specific, but we are operating in COVID times, and we do very, very strongly believe that public transport will be extended to be part of the workplace for the purposes of COVID-19. Ordinarily, public transport would not be workplace, but under COVID, it will have that protection and that cover. So do just bear that in mind. If you do have staff who are catching public transport and they do raise their concerns. Of course, so what is the option? For those employees, you can obviously put them on the current furlough scheme, but that of course comes to an end on the 31st of October. Look at other alternatives, see if they can drive their own car into work. Make sure that if that is the case, there is parking facilities. Perhaps they can use a bike, or they can work from home, or perhaps they can work from an office that is closer to home. So, you know, have a look at that. What we also need to have a look at is, just very briefly, I think I missed it earlier on in one of my slides, but I am conscious of the time. So let's just have a quick recap on how the new schemes compare to the old schemes. And I did print it, but I had it in the wrong place. I do just want to go back to it, and I will share this with you in our Q&A document. So the original furlough scheme, so just looking at it from a cost impact to businesses, the original furlough scheme, which ends on the 31st of November, sorry, 31st of October, it comes to an end. The employer paid 20% of wages, and the government picked up 60% of wages, and the employee had to forego 20% of their wages. Under the new support scheme, where businesses have to close because the government has forced the organisation, the area where the organisation is into tier 3, the government will be picking up 67% of the wages, but the employees, the employee will forego 33% of their wages. For the support scheme where businesses are open, the employee must work at least 20% of their wages, for which they will get paid. The employer will pick up that 5%. The government will pay the remaining 49%, and the employee will forego by a wage reduction by 27%. I thought that was quite interesting to visually see those differences. But as I say, I will make sure that that is sent to you as part of the information that goes out. So very, very quickly, let's have a look at preparing your businesses for lockdown. Let's be realistic. There is a real risk that at some point in the next few months, the area where your business operates or where it is located is going to be placed in the tier 3 restrictions, which means you are going to be forced to close. Prepare your business now. Prepare your staff now for that eventuality. Unlike when we had the national lockdown back in March, which was presented to us with no notice, it left many businesses unsure what to do. It is different at the moment because we have time to prepare. So take the time now to prepare, to put a plan together, what you as an organisation will need to do and how it is going to be. By sharing that with your staff, they will know what to do when overnight the area that your business is in is put into tier 3. They will be very clear on what the expectations are and what will happen. This will alleviate a lot of stress for you as a business owner, line manager who is going to be dealing with those queries. So make sure that you have that plan in place. Many businesses had fantastic disaster recovery plans in place. HR for UK was one of them. But what we didn't do is made a provision for a pandemic crisis. So my recommendation is, even if you do have that disaster recovery plan in place, review it to make sure that you have got some plans in place for that lockdown if you go into tier 3. Review your plans, make sure it's communicated and shared with your team. Just moving on very quickly, looking at COVID-19 inspectors. with the increasing outbreaks in workplaces, the HSE have employed additional inspectors to check on the workplace to ensure that they are, and if they are open, they have got those COVID-19 measures in place to prevent the transmission of COVID-19. Make sure that you carry out that risk assessment. We do have that downloadable COVID-19 risk assessment that you can still use. You can go back to our previous webinar where we covered making sure that your business is COVID-19 secure. If you're unsure, drop us an email and we can send those links to you again so you can have a revisit. One point to bear in mind is that if your business has to close because of an outbreak in your organization, you will not be covered under the job support scheme, okay? It is a local health problem, but it will not be covered under the scheme because employees will not be working. It will also not be covered under the job support scheme because you will not be under the Tier 3 restrictions. So very, very important to make sure that your business is COVID-19 secure. That's everything that I have got to share with you. So I'm going to quickly pop into the questions. I'm going to spend the next 2 or 3 minutes just having a look at those questions. I'm going to run through those as quickly as I can so that I can answer those questions. If I don't get to your question, don't worry. It is going to be put into the Q&A and that will be circulated out to you next week. So let's have a look. Nicola has a question. Has there been any clarification about holidays taken? Does the employer top up like the old furlough scheme? Nicola, I think I've answered that question again. There has been clarification. Holidays under the job support scheme are incompatible. There is no top up. The scheme will not subsidise any holiday. Any holiday that an employee takes has to be paid at 100% of their normal wages, which will be their pre-COVID wages, including any overtime and so guaranteed overtime and commission earnings that they may have had will have to be paid by the employer at 100%. So again, I do hope that answers your question. So Jason has asked a question. Can we claim the government contribution on either the scheme of holiday pay, the employee takes annual leave during the duration of the scheme? Again, Jason, hopefully I've answered that question, but a full detailed answer will come out in our Q&As. Jason has got another lovely question for us. Does the agreement being in writing include an email acceptance, or must it be an actual signature? Email acceptance is acceptable. Of course, we're working remotely, so an email acknowledgement referring to the scheme will be acceptable, as long as, of course, you make sure that the two documents sit next to each other when you submit it to HMRC if they question that. So yes, email acceptance is perfectly acceptable. It doesn't have to be the agreement itself signed. So hopefully that answers your question. Angela, hello, my name's Sake. We have three, we probably have more in the room, but I know of three, so hello. So question from Angela, do we know if the employee reduced hours can be varied week by week depending on workload? Absolutely. So there is, as long as they work that minimum of 20 hours per week, it may be more next week and then less the following week. The period that it has to refer to is a 7-day period. So if you work for Monday to Friday, the minimum requirement is 20%. If it's going to drop below 20%, in that 7-day period, you will not be able to use the scheme. So again, it is that minimum 20% for that 7-day period. But of course, it may vary from week to week, particularly as work demands require. So we've got another question from Ewan. If an employee wishes to work, but under the test and trace scheme must isolate, are they covered under the scheme during isolation? So I'll come back to you. I'm going to put my little record on. If someone is self-isolating and they've been advised under the test and trace scheme that they have to self-isolate, they are not working, so they will not be able to participate under the scheme. So again, I hope that answers that question. So Amy has got a quick question. I'm going to whistle stop through for a few more questions because there are lovely questions there. So I'm going to keep going. What is the maximum percentage of hours worked to use the job support scheme, open scheme? We have a member of staff who will work the majority of the hours and will be around 5 hours, around 5 hours of her normal working hours. Can we apply for the scheme? So there is no cap on the maximum number of hours that an employee works, but of course an employee, when they are actually working, will get paid for the hours that they work at their normal rate of pay. Don't forget that the scheme is only supporting you for those unworked hours, those furloughed hours, those hours where they are not able to work. So there is no maximum hours that the employee can work, but of course there is a minimum requirement for hours that they do work. So again, it's managing that. I hope I've answered your question, but do look out for our Q&A and I will make sure that a detailed answer is in there. So the next question I've got is from Jennifer. Hello, Jennifer. What are employers expected to pay employees that are having to self-isolate? So that is a very good question. So self-isolation, you will be able to, as I understand it, you'll be able to claim under the statutory sick pay scheme. If an employee has not previously, if you've not previously made a claim under the coronavirus statutory sick pay claim, you will be able to put it through. Otherwise, it'll be as ordinary statutory sick pay through the claim that we normally do it. If that changes, I will let you know. But certainly someone who has to self-isolate, you will be able to claim it from day one under the statutory sick pay coronavirus scheme. Don't forget that there's the two schemes. There's the ordinary scheme and there's the COVID scheme. You will be able to claim it through there. Of course, if you have company sick pay policy, do have a look at what your policy wording says. But under the COVID sick pay, it's from day one. Amy, you appear to have oh no, another question's come in. So Amy, let's just come back. So 5 hours per week short. Amy, I'll have to go back to your previous question. What I will do is I will come back to you personally with a response, but for everybody else's benefit, I will make sure that that is in the Q&A answer. So sorry if you haven't got your answer right away, but I will come back to it. So last question from Jennifer. In reference to us having to close due to a positive test, and all staff have no work to attend from the staff that are not ill, but we are closed. So again, if you are closed because you have had a positive test, you will not be able to participate in the scheme because that will be due to a local public health closure. It's not a closure because you are in tier 3. So there is that difference. So the closure, you will have to consider as an organisation what those payments will be. And again, I think what you will need to have a look at is, have any of those employees previously been isolated before? If they have, they will not be able to claim again. If they haven't, you will be able to put a claim in from day one. If not, it'll be ordinary SSP. So again, Jennifer, I will make sure that that is cleared out in our response. So lovely, thank you very much. I know there's a few more questions there, but I am going to turn into a pumpkin. You know, I've long overstayed my hour slot, but do bear in mind there is help and support there. You know, don't try and suffer on your own. You know, HR for UK are here to help you. We don't want you to go through this next phase of this pandemic crisis on your own. Help is at hand. We are only a phone call away. You can give us a call on 01455 444 222 and we will be able to help you. You can also drop us an email at info@hrforuk.com, You can go to our website and fill out a contact us form through www.hrforuk.com. Do get in touch. We have got so much help that we can help you with, and it is cost effective. You know, we will be able to find a solution that works for your business so that we can make sure that you come out of this successfully. On many times, I think that we're actually at the knife edge point on the next hoop on that you know, coronavirus roller coaster. Join us. Work with us. We will work with you, and we will make sure that you come out of this you know, successfully. So right at the very beginning of the webinar, I mentioned that we are going to be making a few minor changes. So we will continue with our Friday afternoon coronavirus scheme and questions and queries every Friday. Not every Friday, one Friday a month. So the next Furlough Friday webinar will be on the 20th of November, and this is going to just really focusing on supporting businesses through the coronavirus crisis, looking at those different schemes. But to be able to help you to have a look at HR issues, we are starting a brand new HR for UK HR surgery, and this is going to be starting from Wednesday the 4th of November at 11 o'clock. So look out for those invites. It is an open interactive HR surgery. It's for any HR questions, COVID related or otherwise, and we look forward to engaging with you with those live questions. It will be an open webinar, so we will be able to give you that personal answer to those Q&As during our HR surgery. But of course, I look forward to seeing you all back here on Friday the 20th of November at 3 o'clock, where we continue with our furlough and what is coming next in relation to those furloughed hours, the job support scheme, open and close, and how you are surviving as an organisation. Just a quick reminder, HR for UK are ready and waiting to help and support you. Just quick reminders on those contact details. Telephone number is 01455 444 222. Email is info@hrforuk.com, and of course our website is www.hrforuk.com. We're always here to help you, and I thank you for your time. Have an amazing weekend, everybody, and don't forget those clocks go back, and I will see you in a few weeks' time to answer those all-important questions. Thank you, and bye-bye for today.